think about you got to get in if you want to get off.
All right, welcome to the Money Lap. Oh, wait, I just totally screwed it up. I was going to say something wrong. I was reading something at the same time. All right, welcome to the Money Lap. I'm Parker Kligerman, joined by Landon Castle. As always, this is our podcast about all motorsports and all things motorsports. Landon, before we go any further, I have to give you huge props for a level 10 dedication to the podcast in terms of taking not only your mic. I thought you were taking the mic. You took the mic and a massive boom thing with you to wherever you are in the country, Iowa, right now.
Yeah, thank you. I am at Castle Motors in
your friend in the car business.
Your friend in the car business. So if you need a vehicle, go to castlemotors.com. My family's business. So we made it 4 episodes of the Money Lap before we had to postpone by a day and scrambling to get our schedules aligned and record a show.
Yeah, but you did tweet that we're in the top 1%, which is awesome.
That's right. We made it through. What did I saw a tweet that said that most podcasts fail after 3 episodes, and we made it to 4. So,
well, we're top 1%. We're the best.
There.
We're in the Cup Series of podcast. Let's go to the PR lap, because this is where we can talk all about ourselves and all the great things about our podcast, including reviews out there. We're just under 60 reviews on Apple Podcasts, and we're on our way to 100. And one review out here, I'm not going to read the whole thing because this is essentially an essay that was written about our podcast by Rob Panic, who basically, I'm just going to sum this up. I'm going to start with the beginning and we'll sum it up a little bit. He said, I recently stumbled upon the Money Lap podcast hosted by Parker Kligerman and Landon Castle, and I must say it has become an absolute favorite of mine. This podcast strikes the perfect balance between racing excitement and invaluable financial insights. I don't know what he's been listening to. Here's why I believe it deserves a solid 5-star rating. He then does many, many paragraphs. And in conclusion, the Money Lap podcast of Parker Kligerman and Landon Castle is a true gem. It combines the excitement of racing with valuable and financial insights, creating a one-of-a-kind listening experience. Thanks, Rob. That was really nice.
Hey, I think, Parker, I'm going to add a new feature to the PR lap here. I think we need to rate these reviews. I'm giving this review 4.9.
Okay. So it's out of 5.
It's a 5-star review for us. Thank you. I'm giving it 4.9. I'm giving it's really a 5-star review. It's a 5-star of a 5-star review. I'm giving it, 4.9 to 5.0. I think the only thing that for me that determines between a 4.9 and 5.0, the writing on it is so good. I am questioning, the actual authenticity, Rob.
This is this is a controversy.
Honestly, there's so much to it. There's so much depth to this writing that maybe this came from Rob's heart, and he just needed a writing assistant or a co-writer of some kind or a ghostwriter. So, and that's okay too. I think it is meaningful. So I just talked myself into it. I'm upgrading it completely to a 5.0. So I just gave it our first review of a review.
This is a great addition to our podcast, and I just want to point out that you may be alluding to the fact that this could potentially have been ChatGPT writing this review.
It could have been artificially intelligence written.
Yeah. Which,
but there's a lot of unique. There's a lot of unique points. So Rob, thank you. Thanks for the review. Leave us some more reviews, and we'll rate your reviews. And I'm gonna rate them pretty honestly, even though you guys go through the time and effort to give us a review. We're still gonna be real with you here at the Money Lap.
We will. And guess what? It's working, because last week was our biggest episode basically since the premiere episode. And I think it basically beat the premiere episode in every metric, awesome. Which is great. So we're gaining momentum. A lot of people out there listening. Please leave us reviews if you want to be here on the PR lap, just like Rob. And even if you have some AI assistance in doing so, we do
bring your best AI review to us, please.
Please. That'd be awesome. We also talk about our own racing here, which I did this past, I would want to say weekend, but I basically raced this week because we didn't finish the Xfinity race till like 11:30 on Monday in Charlotte. Unfortunately for me, I practiced and qualified on Friday, which didn't go great. We were too low in the front end of our car. We fixed it, though. Patrick Donahue and Cody McKenzie got to work and put their brains together and figured it out. And we started off the race, and we're pretty fast, especially in the rain when we ran the first 45 laps of this race in pouring rain, which was wild. And I was running the wall, and suddenly it was going so fast. It was crazy. I wanted the race to go on. Then we took a little break. I went home, took a nap, had lunch, watched the Coca-Cola 600, and then we continued our race into the nighttime, almost ending later at night. We had a fuel fuel pump, that broke, that then snapped our fuel cable, which was unfortunate. We actually got it fixed and got back out there to run about the last 30 laps of the race or whatever and learn some things. But Landon, this does bring up a really big issue right now, which is your season last year. You had a gearbox issue at Coda. I had a gearbox issue at Coda. You had a fuel cable fail at Charlotte. I've had a fuel cable fail at Charlotte. What else, Nostradamus, should I be ready for in my season here in 2023? What's going on?
You are mimicking my season. I don't know. I don't know. There's going to be some good things that happen to you, but there's the pain and suffering is yet to come.
Thanks. So wait, can I turn it around? Where can we make better decisions? Help.
Oh man, I don't know if you can change fate. I don't know how that. I don't know how that works.
I
need
to change
man.
We need to change it.
So last week on, I don't know if it was on our last week episode, but remember how we talked about how in May, Charlotte weekend is always like a signal of crew chief changes and personnel changes and driver changes start to get either talked about or actually happen. I always feel like also this beginning of this summer stretch, and then especially when you get into the heat of the summer, is when you really get into the stress tests of these race cars, and you start to find out how well all these teams are taking inventory and management of their parts and pieces over time, and with the things that properly get mileaged out and replaced before they break, and then some teams just get behind on mileaging their parts and pieces out, and they have recurring mechanical issues. I mean, I've dealt with that. I feel like this is maybe a little bit out of character for a team of your caliber, but some of the smaller teams, even in the Xfinity Series especially, you're going to start seeing more and more mechanical failures because it's like they started the season with the freshest stuff that they have, but they didn't keep it up like they need to, and they maybe don't have the best processes in place to manage that stuff. And it's like you're going to go to the Poconos and the Michigan and this stretch of races where it can be hard on drivetrain and electrical and all that stuff.
It happens.
So
Definitely for the smaller teams. You just start to see as you get in the summer months and those long stretches, it's it not only tasks your equipment, it tasks your people. It pushes everyone to the edge. It pushed a lot of the Xfinity teams to the edge this weekend with this race being postponed, with Portland and Sonoma back to back now. West Coast, the trucks having to leave on
West
Tuesday.
Coast swing.
Yeah, so it's really pushed a lot of the teams, and so it's tough because you had teams that were having to work on Sunday, that were working, in between the 45 laps we ran in the morning on Monday and coming back later that night and, getting things done. My team was actually really ahead, which was great planning. So everyone just had to come in early on Tuesday on very little sleep and just basically load everything in the hauler, which was great. So, there's all different, but it pushes everyone so far when you have these sort of delays like this. But let's not delay any further. Go ahead.
It's that time of season. I mean, you got to have the right stuff, and we're gonna uncover these teams that have the right stuff. The other day, I was out for a long run the other day. Speaking of right stuff,
were you?
So have you ever? Well, I know you've been running a lot lately. Yes. I've been running a lot lately. I'm at like 30, 40 miles a week right now. And you ever had one of those days where you're out for a long run? It's really hot out. You're feeling really strong. Like nothing can stop you. Your legs are fresh. Well, that was me the other day. I was feeling good. But then out of nowhere, and I always say out of nowhere, it's like when this happens, it's like a slow burn. I start feeling this warming pain from my chest, right? And then I start to notice it's like with every bounce of the earth, there's like sandpaper brushing against my, headlights. I was experiencing chafing in a very uncomfortable area. I don't want to get into the specifics, but you know what I mean, right?
Yep. I've got this.
So,
I figured it out.
After that, I realized it was really hard to enjoy my hobby without the right gear. A bad shirt ruined my experience for this whole run. I mean, I was only halfway through the run when it started, and ruined my experience for this whole run and the days following it. I knew after that I needed to invest in some softer shirts if I want to enjoy running. And I also realized, having the right gear is important for any hobby. And that's where Spoiler Diecast comes in. Parker, SpoilerDiecast.com is one of the largest inventories of in-stock products in the industry. From NASCAR to dirt cars, sprint cars, IndyCar, and F1. Let's not forget about their pre-order system. We talked about that last week with $0 down option. Talk about flexibility, right? Plus, they have a promo code, MONEYLAP, for free shipping and 5% off on all orders. And if you're looking for some of my rare diecast, you can get my number 10 Voyager car from last year for 20% off right now. So whether you're out for a long run, Parker, or you're looking to upgrade your diecast collection, SpoilerDiecast.com has the gear you need to enjoy your hobbies to the fullest. Trust me, it's like a breath of fresh air on a hot day. So head on over to their website, use the promo code MONEYLAP, that's MONEYLAP, for free shipping and 5% off on all orders. You won't regret it. But I'm not sure that they sell soft T-shirts, so you might have to get that from somewhere else.
That was incredibly smooth.
SpoilerDiecast.com, Parker.
Thank you. SpoilerDiecast.com. Thank you for your support of Money Lap Podcast. Please go out, check them out for all your diecast needs. You did trick me into another ad. Had no idea. Thank you once again. I want to know from the listeners out there if they feel tricked every time, because it's great and I love it. I love it. Before we get off the PR lap, just real quick, I just want to give a shout out to all the people that sent us DMs when we moved the time of this podcast coming out Wednesday morning because of my lack of sleep and your travel issues to this hopefully Wednesday evening. And we got numerous people DMing us that we asked for complaints, but instead they just gave us really nice, encouraging words about doing the podcast and that they're all listening and they like it. And they're enjoying it, and so we just want to say thanks. But you can send us mean DMs too; we don't mind. That's fun too.
We're
and
definitely
also we all see
we're in the early adopter phase of this growth.
Yeah.
So we appreciate all of the support.
Let's talk about all the motorsports from this past weekend, the biggest weekend in motorsports, and a lot of things looking ahead. Remember, you can get all the motorsports news directly to your inbox with the Money Lap newsletter at themoneylap.com. And we start with endurance racing. Before we look back at everything this past weekend, we are 1 week away from the Le Mans 24-hour practice sessions, and one of the biggest news things to drop as of late, which will be an amazing race, by the way, because of these new cars, this hypercar era, this GTP era for IMSA, a lot of manufacturers involved. It's very cool. GT racing has sort of become across the board the same over the world. Yeah, there's a lot of interest in this. Van Wall has replaced the 1997 Formula One world champion Jacques Villeneuve with IMSA Sports Car Championship race winner Tristan Vautier for their return to Le Mans 24 Hours. It seems like, unfortunately, for all the nostalgia of people out there, Villeneuve was just not fast enough. And I bring this up because I have seen that guy many years ago. Now, this is a decade ago. I watched him at Road America in an Xfinity car for one of the first times, put on a show. And I just thought, this guy has driven so many different things. He's obviously fast. So it makes me a little sad to see someone be replaced, especially in sports cars, for not having the performance, who I've seen be so awesome. There's basically, a ticking clock on us all, Landon. That's basically what I'm saying.
I can't imagine a world where he's not fast enough, and I'm not familiar enough with the sports car racing to really know who's challenging him for that role, but I can only imagine being the one that replaces Jacques Villeneuve.
I know Tristan Vautier very, very well from my IMSA time of doing TV. He's a great dude. and through the GTP sort of wasn't in a great position ride wise. So this is, I think, a good pickup for him. But yeah, that's an interesting place to be, because I'm sure Tristan was like, wait, I watched Jacques Villeneuve.
Is Jacques one of the last of the? I mean, he's kind of a legendary 90s, early 2000, not even early 2000. I mean, like 90s and early 2000 open wheel sports car drivers. Is he one of the last of the Mohegans there?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. I'm trying to think of what Jarno Trulli's up to, or Fisichella, I think, is racing GT cars. Jacques, I mean, he was amazing in kart, then goes over to Formula One, was really good. Had the dyed hair for a while, so 90s with the small sunglasses as a style. Had like the blonde hair highlights. I thought it was pretty cool. Speaking of that, there is something I want to give a shout out to, and that is this series that has popped up on Instagram that has just overtaken my world and my nostalgia. And that is, it's called Endurance Legends. And they take all of the 90s through early 2000s prototypes and GT cars from sports car racing in Le Mans and put them in a series that now races, I guess. But you don't even need to watch the races. I don't even care how the races go. Just seeing all these cars makes me literally almost tear up every time I see it on Instagram. And I keep reposting these because it's just the most incredible mix of McLaren F1 GT cars, F40s, the 550 Maranello GT cars, the Astons that were amazing, Corvettes, all the random prototypes. I don't know if you remember this, but in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were so many weird prototype manufacturers and different combinations of prototypes that had V8s, V12s, V10s, ones that had turbos and didn't. It was just such a wild time for sports car racing. And so anyway, it's really cool to see this. If you're on, I'm assuming you're on Instagram if you listen to this podcast, go to Endurance Legends. I don't even know when they race, what it is, but as a follow, it's incredible.
It's beautiful. I'm looking at it right now. It makes you realize how romantic sports car racing could be.
It is. It's like there's those cars. Because they're the cars. I loved cars growing up as a kid. Like, they're the cars that I fell in love with that also raced. And then, to see them out and about again. And Saline S7s are out there. Like, come on.
Gosh. That was
it's
like
so
my dream
cool.
car when I was a kid.
I know. It is such a weird car when you think about it now. Like,
Have you been to the Goodwood Festival, Speed?
I have not. I've always wanted to.
Yeah, that's Money Lab might have to go to the Goodwood next year.
We'll do a live show there. You heard it here now.
That'd be awesome.
The Goodwood Festival live show. We need them to help us set it up, though, so we need to get really big. Tell all your friends about the Money Lab. Send it to all your friends. We need to get bigger to make it to the Goodwood Festival. Last thing on sports cars, I did see this. Hertz currently sponsors a car, one of the Porsches in the FIA World Endurance Championship, and one of the prototypes. And the CEO hinted that the rental car company could soon sponsor other forms of racing, and that said the future of Hertz in auto racing is a bright one and a big one. So look out for Hertz.
What do you think that is?
I don't know. I find this fascinating. I've always found rental car companies to be interesting in how they interact with motorsports. One, because obviously the industry runs on rental cars. We have to. That's the way the whole industry operates throughout the world. But rental car companies are sort of they try to sell the cars, but a lot of times to me, it's like it's a convenience factor. It's a price thing. So it's not really competing on brand in that sense. So I don't know. I've never dealt with a rental car company and how they use motorsports. So you tell me.
I don't know.
What do you think?
I mean, so I don't know if you noticed, but and this is on a different scale than Hertz sponsoring World Endurance Championship, but I think Ryan Ellis's car this weekend in Charlotte was sponsored by a company called Flexcar, which I noticed because I had rented a car through Flexcar recently, and that's like a all-in-one app. Really easy. They have like local pickup locations, and it's good for like all durations of rentals. Not an ad for Flexcar, but I had a good experience with them. That seemed kind of like a modern disruptor for rental cars. It's not necessarily a rental car that's housed at an airport type deal. So I was wondering, when I'm looking at this tweet from Adam Stern reporting, those quotes from the Hertz CEO, I'm wondering what their activation around that is and what their, how they're trying to reach people. And for him to say that they could sponsor other racing series beyond World Endurance Championship, is that continuing the same demographic, going sports car racing or open wheel like IndyCar F1? Or does that mean that Hertz is taking a look at NASCAR? I mean, I think they were most recently on Hendrick
Penske, maybe?
Motorsports car.
Or was it Yeah, it was Hendrick. You're right. Hendrick was.
I think it was
most
on
recent.
William Byron's car.
Yep.
Before they
Well
went
done.
bankrupt.
Yep. Well done. And if they do want to come back, I would just like to put it out there that I am President Circle at Hertz, and I've probably rented about, I don't know, upwards of 30 cars a year
So you're a Hertz
with
guy.
them. Yeah, I'm a Hertz guy. I was Avis, but then I switched to Hertz through NBC, and now I'm religiously Hertz. And so much so that there's actually a wonderful lady at the Hertz Charlotte Airport check-in desk who I became friends with, and I've been able to get hats and gear from some of my rides because she would always make sure I had a car waiting and has always taken care of me for all the years I've had to rent Hertz cars here.
So not to make this
became a
full-on
Hertz ad
for Hertz, but I noticed something, and Josh pointed it out in the chat. Hertz does rentals with Teslas, and they had a whole fleet of Teslas at the airport this week because I actually rented a Hertz car this week for a different story, which we can or cannot get into, but reluctantly had to rent a car this week because I had flight issues and had to do some driving. But yeah, I noticed there was a bunch of Teslas. So I disagree with you on the marketing point. I think there is some kind of branding and attraction. I mean, I always liked renting Avis cars because for whatever reason, I thought Avis had nicer cars.
Yep.
They always had leather and, I don't know. I always thought they spec'd out their cars a little bit better with nicer options. I don't even know if that's true or not. It was in my head that was the case, so I would always go towards Avis. And I had an easier time using the Avis app and stuff like that. So
I agree. You're right on that, and the app is a big thing for me, and Hertz became the better app, even though Avis was a better app before that. I have a wizard number of Avis as well, so I've rented a lot of cars. But they were my go-to before Hertz. And this is really, we're going to put everyone to sleep with our. If anyone out there would like to know more about our rental car habits, please write to us.
The point of the conversation is, we're interested in, like, why is Hertz interested in motorsports? Like, not just World Endurance Championship, but for the CEO to make a comment that the future of Hertz and auto racing is a bright one and a big one, and that they could sponsor other series. Why is that?
No, it's actually a really good point. And I think whatever Flex Car is, Turo, you're right. Maybe at this point they win on brand, right? They win on brand affiliation and, being a maybe more premium brand by being associated with sports car racing and maybe Formula One, IndyCar, like you mentioned. Their app, I think the app is a huge thing for companies like theirs where ease of use to the app and it working is incredibly important to your success or failure. So, they're up against what you mentioned, FlexCar, which is maybe an entirely digital native company that is going to be, solely focused on that and have that great app. You didn't agree.
I don't. I'm like losing you. I don't know. I don't hear you.
Oh. But everything I said was great.
I heard you say win on brand, and then the internet derped out here. So, but I think I'm back.
That's all right. All right. Well, the point of the story is it is interesting that Hertz says they want to be in racing more. Where they go will be interesting to see, and how they use it, and if other companies follow in that rental car arena, right? And what kind of money they can spend on it? What's the budget? What are they going to dive into? That's the questions. Let's move into Formula One. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it. And I have something extra. I want to talk about this, some of the underbody stuff, and I had some thoughts too on simulator stuff that I've been seeing pop up on social media. So I want you to get into. Stick with the show here and get into it, and we'll dive into the conversation.
Let me set the stage. You can take it anywhere you want. So Max Verstappen won the pole after a incredible drive in the last sector of qualifying 3, where he was able to beat Fernando Alonso. There's been I know you have a lot of information on that, so that was interesting. In terms of the race, it was an interesting race in that you had a start that looked very much like Monaco. They got away. Fernando Alonso did not get a better start than Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen drove away. But then there was rain, and this created a moment in time where rain basically was starting to fall at one side of the racetrack. It wasn't on the front stretch, and teams were deciding, do they go to the intermediates? Is it the rain just going to flash almost a sun shower, then go away? And none of the leaders had pitted yet. And the pit is always the most important part of Monaco because it might be the only place an overtake happens. Well, Fernando gained a little bit of time on Max as the rain hit, maybe just traffic as Max was trying to lap people and that sort of thing. It became a little bit chaotic with cars on slicks running into the wall almost and having to go tiptoe around in the wet parts. Aston Martin pits Fernando Alonso before Max Verstappen. So at this point, the ball is in their court. They've already put Lance Stroll on intermediate tires because they probably believe it's raining enough. But they don't put Fernando on intermediates. They put him on slicks. He then has to trundle around. It gives Red Bull a chance to react. They, react accordingly, and Fernando gains no time whatsoever. And the whole time it was happening, I was yelling, put him on intermediates, and he doesn't. I could call that race from Charlotte. If they had, in my belief, I can't remember the exact second difference, they would have made it up. They would have overtaken Max and then just had to hold him off. Massive miss by Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso in what was, a race that maybe was for the taking for them. So really, really disappointing. But let's go back to qualifying because I know you want to jump into some of that stuff of Max Verstappen and how he won that pole.
That was... So I'm actually pulling up the data right now because I made this tweet thread about qualifying, and it was who else qualified fast? Let's see. Let's look at Charles Leclerc. Was he fast?
You're testing my memory.
What's that?
I said you're testing my memory by asking if he was fast.
Well, if you look at my Twitter thread, I made this point about how entry is everything. And I truly believe, especially at these road courses, you want to make straightaways long, and there's this conventional knowledge of easy in, hard off, but there's so many scenarios where you can just make up so much time on entry and there's little to no penalty on exit. And that's what Verstappen did on Alonso through turn 14, which is a swimming pool, and turn 16, which is that's the second to last corner. So Max was about 0.2 down on Alonso going into the swimming pool. He gained all of those 0.2 completely on entry and through his mid-corner speed. Just bombs it into the corner. Pretty much, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but you could say he threw away his exit. He bombs it into the corner, gains a 0.2, threw away about a 0.5 on exit, and then does it again into turn 16. Just bombs it in on entry. This time in turn 16, he gives away pretty much nothing on exit, and just steals the pole right there in those two corners. The whole lap, I'm looking at it now. 10.5, almost 0.2 off. So then, you could ask, well, did Alonso just screw up 14 and 16? I'm looking at Charles Leclerc's the Ferrari lap.
You had it, Charles Leclerc.
Same delta to Verstappen and Alonso, but same delta to Verstappen as Alonso. Maybe Leclerc was 0.03, came out of turn 14 a 10th behind, came out of turn 16 0.3 behind. It was really 14 and 16. Max just bombs it in on entry. So, anyways, if you're a race car driver or if you're thinking about that kind of thing, and you hear easy in, hard off, you got to think about the flip side of that. Think about you got to get in. if you want to get off. Sorry. I didn't tell that whole story to make a punchline.
I didn't think you were going to say it. That's so good. Oh,
I think that's one thing that those drivers do so well when they come to NASCAR. Sports car drivers, and you look at like AJ Allmendinger, and I think one thing they do so well is maximize the braking. I think stock car drivers are typically what we're used to on oval tracks, even short track ovals, isn't always bombing it into corner. I think we're really good at floating the cars into the corner, using 80% of the braking capacity, not 100% of the braking capacity, having a more not as steep of a decel of the car. And I think, drivers that race cars with high downforce, IndyCar drivers, open wheel, sports car drivers, they're just really good at getting all of the braking potential out of their cars. And I mean, that was what we saw with Max at Monaco was a masterclass in it. And that's certainly where they beat stock car drivers going into, when they come over and they race stock cars, they do really well on entry. Where that does tend to bite them is they burn the brakes up a lot in stock cars because they don't always know the limits of the tire and the limits of the brakes in our cars. So you'll see a driver, get in our cars and they're really, really fast, or they can make a really fast lap and they're really good under braking, but they're essentially overusing the brakes. With our cars, it's really easy to just, there's only so much brake pedal you can use. You could push harder, but all you're going to do is generate more heat. And that's just hard on the tires and hard on the braking system.
And that's the key, because braking in a stock car is entirely different than a lot of other race cars, because you get to what you call, quote unquote, 100% braking potential, and then you actually stay there for a long period of time in a long braking zone for a stock car. Say turn one at Indy, turn one at Portland, that sort of thing. We call it tabletopping. If you can see the data, the trace spikes to basically 100% brake, and then it sits there for a moment, and then it starts to bleed off. Whereas almost every other race car in the world is more like a mountain peak. You'll peak at the highest pressure possible, and then immediately start to decrease from there because you're utilizing the downforce at the moment of most braking potential is when it has the most downforce, which is when you're going the fastest, and then you have to release brake from that point onward to be able to go, which you'll see in F1. F1, a brake trace is a mountain peak consistently because they're just maximizing the braking under full downforce and then getting out of the brake as fast as they possibly can, modulating it. So it's interesting. And you're right, by the way, the entry stuff. So it always matters.
Thank you. Yes. And entry is important. I'm going to keep watching that. That won't be the last that I talk about it, because I'm going to see that. I particularly in F1 qualifying, I'll look at the data here as I remember it on a weekly basis and just see, where the pole sitter is making up time, and see if it trends that way where it's often won on entry. Because Max definitely Monaco, turn 14, turn 16. He won the pole by winning the race to the entry right there. Before we move on from F1, I wanted to bring up some of the photos and the news that's been reported on these cars getting towed off the track or lifted off the track and their underbodies getting photographed. So I think there was a Red Bull that was photographed, a Mercedes that was photographed.
Yep.
Talk about that, and then I also want to turn that into some of the other reports that I've seen of a lot of F1. I don't know if it's social media reporting or what kind of reporting it is, but they're talking about I see these reporting on like upgrades, like, oh, we found 0.2 or 0.3 of speed in the sim, and people are getting quotes from team managers or whatever talking about the speed they find in the sim. I want to talk about that too. So, first of all, what do you think about teams and photos being taken of underbodies? Like, let's talk about that.
So this has been going on for a very long time, which is that, you have these racetracks, especially Monaco for many years was one of the few that had this, where you have a crane that picks the car up off the racetrack and removes it if it's been in an accident of some sort, right? One of the things you you get with that is you get to see underneath these cars, which you never get to see. You get to see the FIA legality plank and then sort of how they design the underneath of the race car, which creates a tremendous amount of downforce, especially in the modern day Formula One car, which is designed to create a lot of downforce underneath. So it's really exposing something none of the teams want you to see. And for years, it also exposed a couple of things, which was your weight distribution. So you'd see a Jaguar get brought up, right, into the air, and suddenly it had way different weight distribution potentially than, say, a McLaren at the time, and that sort of thing. So it would just be all these secrets released. And so this isn't new, but it is interesting because, it puts a car,
right? It's getting
it puts a car in a compromising position. So, yeah, exactly. I don't know what they've found, but it's interesting.
Well, what's funny, too, is like we spend in NASCAR, every single team and manufacturer takes thousands of pictures every race weekend of our cars and our competitors' cars. And we're constantly looking at, in NASCAR, our bodies are the same. We don't design, we don't have near as much freedom as F1 does in terms of designing the bodies and the aero makeup of the cars. So, but we still are taking pictures of our competitors' cars and looking at the platform and, the heights of the cars on the racetrack, down the straightaway, through the corners. So it is funny to me to see that stuff spread because it's not just social media that's getting all those pictures. You couldn't imagine the quality of photos that Mercedes has from their photographers of the Red Bull F1 car and the quality of the Mercedes underbody that Red Bull has and their photographers took of the Mercedes car. And I'm not even talking about this is no joke. I'm not talking about their social media people captured these photos. No, their engineering team has photographers that capture these photos that are taking photos of these cars for engineering. They're not getting used for social media. That's a whole different department. These race teams have engineering.
Whole different budget item.
Yeah, whole different budget item to have a photographer on the engineering staff, not on the social media staff. So whatever you saw on social media that you thought that all the social media engineers were looking at and dissecting these photos, you can only imagine how much better it is the ones that the teams actually have. Which kind of leads me to my other point that I wanted to talk about, which was I'm starting to see people reporting about upgrades and what drivers recently experienced in the sim, and I feel like that is such a fool's errand to get sucked into those conversations because I can't tell you how often and how many times we go to the sim and get speed, and find tenths and find time, and you go to the track thinking that you're going to be better and you still run in the same spot that you ran last week. Why is that? Is it because everybody else is getting better, or does the sim not work? Like, what's the deal?
I think sim is entirely dependent on your correlation, right, and how you are able to relate it to real life. And it can be as bad, it can be as big a detriment as it can be a help. I do know that the manufacturer sims we use are very similar to, and the same companies that do the Formula One ones are the same ones we use. So they're using the same stuff, right? And it's very much on the same platform in terms of RF Pro and the physics and all the computers that run all that stuff is very similar. So I think for them, they do have a lot more information than we have, right? So I do think they can see and model a lot more. They do have a lot more wind tunnel data, which is what makes sims very, when you can get wind tunnel data, right, and aero data like they can effectively make it a far more accurate resource than I think than we have the stock car side, because we have to do a lot of interpretation, right, and guesswork. They have a lot more data to work with in Formula One to make those sims more realistic. So I do think they do see those things a little bit. I know what you're saying, which is like, plenty of times we've been super fast in the sim, you show up to the racetrack, and it's like, hey, you're exactly where you were last week. It's like, wait a second, that didn't work at all.
I'll tell you another one.
This makes
I'll tell you
sense.
another one that's fun. I'll tell you another one that's fun, and this isn't so much as the simulator, but I've been racing NASCAR for a very long time. I've done a countless number of Daytona tests, right? Like back in the day, it was Speed Fest or whatever we called it. In January, we go and test in Daytona.
Speed Weeks?
Speed Weeks and no, they called it like Speed Fest because Speed Weeks is when you're down there for Speed Weeks. But anyways, you used to go to Daytona in January and you do all these single car runs. You have your speed. I've done this countless times with Xfinity cars, Cup cars. I did it with the next gen. I've done it with all kinds of stuff. Every single time with every single team that I've gone to Daytona and tested with, whether it was Ford, Chevy, Toyota, we've left the test and said, well, we got another 3 or 4 tenths in the bank because this engine that we've got is just a test motor. And every single team that I've been with has counted that, like they counted that for themselves, but not their competitors. So we would be like, well, we were 29th on single car runs at the test, but we're actually more like, 17th because once we put in the race motor, that's at least worth 3 or 4 tenths. And as a driver,
no one else has
been to all these different teams, I want to be like, hey, the other guys, they did the same thing, right? And what do you know? We come back in February and we qualify 29th. It's like, with our race
That's
motor.
how racing goes. I love that. Wait, do you want my big idea on simulators, by the way? Manufacturer sims? I have an idea because I have sensed in my year now, or my half a year that I've now been a full-time driver again for the first time in a decade, where I have sensed the whole sport is a little bit tired of simulation right now. I sense it from the drivers. I sense it from the crews. I sense it from the engineers. The amount we're relying on it, when we've reduced practice to such a minuscule amount, there's no testing. We're so relying on this. And the problem with it is, as we said, it's open to a ton of interpretation. It is entirely dependent on the amount of data you can gather from the real world and apply, and then also how your driver and your team are interpreting that data and using it and utilizing it and that sort of thing. And so it's just a very gray world in something that should be they try to make very static. And it also is an immense amount of time and effort is put into it from the manufacturer side, from the race team side, across all the manufacturers. And as I said, we're all basically using the same stuff. We're all using the same people to build them. We're all using the same computers and the same programs. And the only difference is that we're interpreting it one way versus the other, right? And some of the people that are working on it, and they all do a great job, and I'm not putting anyone down. I'm just saying we're all basically doing the same thing. So I sat there and I said to someone the other day, I was like, it'd be so much more fun if this wasn't this clandestine, I can't speak right now, but this really secretive thing that we're not allowed to show. Yeah, we're not allowed to show it. We're not allowed to just take pictures. We're not allowed to take video. Everyone's very secret about it, but everyone's doing it, and you can go to the Chevy Tech Center on a day and run into 6 different teams doing it, and you can go to Toyota, and it's the same thing, and you can go to Ford, and it's the same thing, and I'm at lunch the other day, and I bump into Ben Rhodes, who's doing his simulator at Ford, and everyone's doing it, right? We're all doing the same thing. We're all the same routine. We're not allowed to talk about it. I'm like, okay, hold on. Sports are about entertainment. They're about content. This, to me, is a massive missed opportunity in the content sphere. Now, I know iRacing, right, did those midweek or tried to have some sort of, the Pro Invitationals become a midweek thing and that sort of thing, and it didn't really work. And I'm like, it doesn't work because it's you're asking people to do something even more, right? But we're all doing these sims. And I'm like, how can we turn this into something quantifiable, something competitive, something that we could use as content and talk about all this time we're spending on it, and to give the people within the sport just something to care about in the midst of all this simulation? Because I feel like I see burnout among so many of the people in the industry because it's just such a monotonous form of simulation. We're not racing each other. We're literally driving a single car around a track that doesn't change and goes the same lap to lap to lap, and we're tweaking tires and that sort of thing. So my big idea, you can't have a race because you could tweak a tire in a simulation 1% and go 1% faster. You can add grip. You can move what grip each tire has, and it's entirely configurable. But the thing we're all doing that's really interesting in sims is we're trying to guess how fast the cars will be on any given weekend in qualifying, in the race, and then match our setups and that sort of thing to those conditions that you're going to experience that specific weekend. That's some of the time and what tire you get from Goodyear and sort of how it all interacts, right? So I was like, what if the competition was this? What if each week teams and manufacturers were given, by Wednesday at 5 p.m., you need to give what you believe will be the qualifying time, pole, 5th place, 10th, 20th, and 31st. You got to give the fastest race lap. You got to give the average race lap time. And you got to go have a driver drive it on video and everything, right? And the closest team each week wins something. Their closest manufacturer and team wins something each week. Am I the stupidest person alive?
What's the prize?
I don't know. I don't know what the prize will be, but we got to do something. Make it $100,000 prize each week. I don't know, across the whole sport for everyone. My point being, give it to the, let the engineers have a piece. The driver gets a piece, and so they're all picking on each weekend who's going to be closest, and give us something to care about. Give us some content to talk about this, because it is monotonous.
I am bored in the sim. Please.
It is monotonous, and no one's having fun. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. We're doing the coolest thing ever. We get paid, all of us, to try and go faster in circles than a bunch of other people going in circles. So somewhere in there's fun, but we're hell bent on not making it fun, which I find frustrating.
Well, this goes into a major philosophy that I have when it comes to motorsports and the costs of motorsports, and the way I look at those costs and whether they're worthy costs or not, is you have to be able to look at whatever it is you're spending money on in our sport. And in a perfect world, and it's hard to be perfect, but in a perfect world, you should look at those things and say, how is this actually returning value to the person or the entity that's paying for it, right? And in motorsports, most of the time, that's the sponsor, right? And if your sponsor, I always use Kleenex, for example. It's like, if your sponsor is Kleenex and you need $20 million a year from Kleenex to race, and you're going to spend 10 of that 20 million on simulator testing, you have to answer the question, what is Kleenex really getting out of that money being spent in simulation? Right?
Yep.
You could say they're getting, if it makes the car go faster, you could say that they're getting something out of that, because if the car goes faster, it gets more TV time. That's how it returns value to the sponsor. That may not be as quality of a return on their investment if a manufacturer like Chevy saying, hey, we'll spend $10 million on simulators because we can use the simulators for our production cars, right? It's developing the technology and the platform for how we develop our production cars. And in the grand scheme of things, it's the manufacturers that are paying for these simulators. It's not Kleenex necessarily, but if you're a team without a manufacturer alliance, you don't have access to those sims. You have to come up with that money somehow to be able to get time on a simulator, or you don't get time on a simulator and you're not going to compete. So when it comes to the value, that's my way of offering this different perspective on what you said of we have to be getting something out of this.
Yep.
And that's my argument for standardizing parts and pieces in a lot of ways. It's like, hey, if we're not, we're designing these cool space age parts and pieces. I mean, back with the Gen 6 car, we had billet spindles that were, had 24 hours worth of CNC time, started in a, single block of material. And, it's like, well, you're asking a sponsor to spend the $20,000 that it costs to manufacture one of those things, and we don't even advertise them.
I know.
Anyway.
I know. It's well said, and you're right. It's all about the value and who's getting it. And to me, it's just crazy that, we get rid of testing, which maybe was a race car on the track that you could turn into content. We don't put race cars on the track anymore. We do it all behind closed doors in dark rooms.
Yeah.
Let's bring some light to that. Let's put some video out there. Let's put some competition and discussion points around it, because at the end of the day, sports is content. And you're right. If you're spending your money to go faster, fine, but we could also be using that same time. We should have access. Yeah. Real quick, I just want to I want to go through some quick other stuff. I saw this great comparison photo between the F1 cars and the Formula E cars at Monaco in the casino hairpin, and the F1 cars look like each one is worth about 2 Formula E cars. And remember, Formula E had all those like 116 overtakes in their race, which was awesome. Formula 1 had about -7, so not great. Lewis Hamilton, his plant-based burger quick serve restaurant concept called Neat Burger. Raised $18 million in a Series B round as it continues to expand. So good for Lewis in spreading his vegan.
So who wins in terms of
burgers around.
influence in promoting a fast food restaurant? Mr. Beast or Lewis Hamilton?
Lewis probably is putting way less effort personally behind it, so I'm going to say Mr. Beast, of course. But I bet if Lewis is doing it, it's going to be successful. So I wouldn't count him out. You know what we haven't talked about? The Indy 500 happened this past weekend, and Josef Newgarden drank whole milk as he won the race in a last lap pass.
Absolutely the only milk you should drink if you win the Indy 500.
Yeah. If you're a American and a race car driver, you'll drink whole milk, and you'll like it, and you'll have no choice. You'll enjoy it, all right? I thought a lot. Obviously, that race was awesome. We discussed how it's an amazing race. It makes you emotional. Once again, the NBC broadcast, not just saying this because I work for them, but Lee Diffie, Townsend Bell, James Hinchcliffe did an incredible job. I just thought it was an awesome broadcast, a tremendous race, and came down to those last before we get there, one thing that happened, obviously, was there was a big wreck with Kyle Kirkwood and Felix Rosenqvist where Kirkwood's rear tire went and narrowly missed the grandstands, hit a white Chevy Cruze in the parking lot. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the the owner of the car, I believe, will have a new Chevy and a lifetime access pass to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway anytime they want. But this did start a setup of red flags through this race that came down to a late red flag that then the race went green, or basically they went back to yellow and immediately went green on that same lap, which I thought was one of the more interesting things I've ever seen. Personally, I know there's a question out there for people, which is, should green-white checkers basically be a thing? Should ending a race under green at all costs be the way that race control, decides what to do with races? Personally, I say yes. And my reasoning being, I know it's not normal for the Indy 500 to have done what they did, which is have multiple red flags, including going green off, not even one whole pace lap to end the race in a one-lap shootout. But that one-lap shootout gave every one of those 330,000 people and all the hundreds of thousands to millions on TikTok and Instagram that moment to remember, to remind them why they came there. That amazing finish, culmination, climax of the whole event is that finish of the Indy 500. If you have a chance to make it be under green. Now, I'm not saying going to green-white checkers in the Indy 500 because I think the Indy 500 should be 500 miles. We don't want to be talking about the Indy 501. That's a NASCAR thing. It needs to stay true to itself. But if you have that ability by throwing red flags like they did, then by all means, do it. Go after it. Make it a green flag finish, and that's what they did, and you got an amazing finish. I saw there was tons of highlights on TikTok and Instagram comparing the finish of it to the Daytona 500, and that wouldn't have been the case if you don't end that race under green, or at least attempt to end it under green. Now, if there's a wreck on that final lap, so be it. That's the way it goes. They're not all going to be incredible side-by-side finishes. But I felt like in this event, IndyCar, I applaud you in the Indy 500 group for finding a way to end this race under green. And I know it was unconventional, but I agree with it wholeheartedly.
What was more unconventional for you? The going to green right out of pit road or seeing a green checkered? A green-white checkered.
The
Not a
green-white checker?
green-white checkers, but a green-white and then a checker, a one-lap
For
dash.
me,
what is more conventional to you? Unconventional to you?
I think both, and I'll say why. First and foremost, going green off of pit road to me was one of the more
That was ballsy.
ballsy, brazen things I've seen a race control group do in a long time. And they race like 8,500.
By the way, I think
was awesome.
I think
I
applaud that. I applaud that move. I think that move took more courage on race control than doing a green checkered finish. But by the way, I don't want to pat him on the back too much because we, in the professional racing world, have this, we think that we need all these pace laps. And, I mean, shoot, NASCAR, God bless them for their procedures, but it's just like you can't come off pit road without opening pit road once, and then you got to open it again for the lap cars, and then there's got to be one more pace lap, and then there's a lap where we line up and choose. Like, every caution has to have, like, all these. Well, you go to the Benton County Speedway down the road here from where I'm at in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They send you onto the racetrack off of turn 2, and you're coming back to green for your heat race. Like, we ain't got time. Races start at 6 o'clock. We're going to get everybody home by 9. Like, we got to get through 6 classes tonight, 2 sets of heat races, B features, and an A. And they race on Sunday night. We don't have time to be here till midnight. We don't have time for a bunch of pace laps. So the Indy 500, that track's 2.5 miles long. I think they absolutely should send them out and send them to green if they have to. Now, when you need a pace lap, you need a pace lap. I get it. Let's warm our tires up, But hey, it's the end of the Indy 500. We only got one more of these laps. It's a 500-mile race. It's not 501. It's not the Indy 502.5. So I'm with you. Let's send them out, send them right to green, and bring them back to checkered. Now, so I'll dial that back a little bit to what you said, and I'm going to agree with what you said 100%. So sorry if you guys were looking for some heated debate.
They wanted an argument, Landon. They wanted a debate.
I don't know if you wanted an argument. I don't know if I have an argument for you because I love NASCAR overtime. I love, the time and the thought that NASCAR has put into trying to get our races to finish this or their races. And NASCAR does a good job of seeing green flag finishes. I'm totally okay with the Indy 500 being the Indy 500. I don't think the Indy 500 needs NASCAR overtime. No. I think the Indy 500, the IndyCar race control did a phenomenal job doing everything they can. I think they did all of the right things, doing everything they can to see a green flag finish, because I do think that race fans deserve to see a green flag finish. They deserve to see every effort of a green flag finish. And if you're someone that's arguing against what they did on Sunday and saying, no, they shouldn't be red flagging and then green flag and then red flagging. Well, it's just like, well, at what point in the race is it appropriate to start thinking about when the race is going to finish? Mm-hmm. Right? Is it 10 to go? Is it 15 to go? Because every caution lap counts, even back then. Right? So at what point do you hurry the race along and say, oh, no, we've got to cut caution laps so that we can make sure we get to the end of this thing? So I think they did the right thing. I think if you get a chance to red flag it, or you're within 3 or 4 laps to go in the race, and it's like, hey, let's red flag this, knowing that we're going to clean the track and we're going to finish this with 2 laps to go. I think you should.
The flip side to it,
I think they did the right thing.
Yeah, and the flip side to it, just think about this. There was a lot of, I can't remember the race earlier this year, maybe it was the Daytona 500 that we were talking about this, where, it went into multiple overtimes, and fans were annoyed that it went into multiple overtimes, right? And then still ended under caution. And I was like, well, at some point, the race has to end. It can't just go on indefinitely. We'll never get out of here. So I think for NASCAR, I agree with what they have in the green-white checker procedure they have, and I think they finally found the overtime procedure that works for them. That is correct. It's the one we have right now. And for NASCAR's type of racing and what the product they put out there, it's right. As you put it, for the Indy 500, it's got to stay 500 miles, and if they're given this opportunity to do what they did, they should.
By the way, it's not, you can't not count yellow laps. It's not it's
No.
still extra laps, right? Because because people might say, well, let's inside of 10 laps to go, let's just stop counting caution laps, and that way it's still the Indy 500. We end on lap 200. Well, it's not lap 200. It's lap 204, lap 205, because those are laps on the engine, laps on fuel. Teams that were cutting it close on fuel mileage could run out of gas if it goes beyond those 200 laps. So just because you're not counting those laps doesn't mean those laps didn't happen. And so, at that point, it's like, why not? Then what's the problem with red flagging? If you're just going to count laps and not count them, why can't we just red flag it so we can still call it a 500-mile race?
I agree wholeheartedly. If you don't count caution laps, you're adding. It's not the Indy 500. It's the Indy 500 plus. Right. So no, thank you, not happening.
It's the Indy 500 plus the caution laps we didn't count, because let me tell you, the race engineers still count those laps because they care about those. The race engineers count the parade laps.
Yep.
Right, because those laps count. That's fuel that they're burning, right? So, I feel like I'm curious, if there's any IndyCar purists that do listen to the show. I do feel like the IndyCar purists, while they might appreciate that us NASCAR hillbillies are not vouching for green-white checkers, I still think an IndyCar purist is going to ask for no red flags.
Yep.
I think the purest of IndyCar purists didn't like the red flags that they saw on Sunday.
And I'm sure Marcus Ericsson was a major purist. Day. He was a sit and duck. He was a sit and duck because of one style of racing they have before we move on for the Indy 500, and that is snaking down the front stretch where they try to avoid the draft and that sort of thing. I saw a bunch of people on social media have a problem with this, which I don't understand, because that's just essentially very fast cars trying to avoid a draft. We see it all over the place. If it's moving down a different place on the straightaway at a road course in Formula One, or it's snaking down the front stretch of an Indianapolis Motor Speedway, you're trying to break the draft. I will, for those that have a problem with it, if you like the passing you saw in the Indy 500, and especially the slingshot passes, then that sort of snaking will be a part of the show, because the draft being created and the hole in the air being created is large enough to create those passes. I have watched plenty of Indy 500s that did not have the snaking to the level that they have now, as they call it, or dragoning, or whatever, that wasn't there because it was actually just not a very close race, and there was no draft effect, and so no one could pass each other, and you didn't have that sort of movement. So I don't understand the thought process of if it's excessive or that sort of thing, because to me, it's just a product of creating a very entertaining package that allows the cars to slingshot by each other.
I think it's, I don't know. I mean, we're everybody wants to. It's so easy to complain or always pick something apart, and it would be just about the time that we have 3 or 4 Indy 500s in a row that just seem like they're not compelling, and there isn't a lot of passing for the lead that we say, oh, we need a better draft package or something. But I will say on one hand, it's very exciting to watch, and then on the other hand, it's like predictable and discouraging to know that like the leader can't get away. And in a weird way, as much as I was excited for Ericsson and my pre-race pick of a Ganassi car winning the Indy 500, I kind of knew going green to checkered, like he had no shot. Like he was a sitting duck. The leader's a sitting it seems to be a sitting duck at Indy right now. So the snaking itself, that's just, you can't have one without the other, right? You can't have cars that slingshot and big hole in the air without having to try to break that. I think that the thing that was more dramatic is the going below the line, like almost aiming the cars at pit wall and then coming back up at the last second. That seemed pretty dangerous and scary. And
they could probably they could say you can't go below that white line, which might be the pit lane entry line, which probably would be smart safety wise. But I and then on the backstretch you have a natural line, which is the grass. Although if you're Tony Kanaan, it's not a line because you just go below it into the grass at 230 miles an hour, which is wild. Josef Newgarden won $3.666 million. I said that right, 666, for winning the Indianapolis 500, a $17 million purse overall. So our buddy Connor Daly in 8th did probably pretty well as well. The Coke 600 this past weekend for Cup was a $9.4 million purse, that includes charter payouts, 3-year history, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a bit convoluted, but roughly comes to a $9.4 million payout or purse. The Xfinity Series was $1.3 million. The truck $767,000, and Monte Carlo was $1.8 trillion. Is what all the F1 fans tell me. So. Because they have more money than anyone. No, I'm kidding. I have no idea. But yeah, that's some of the payouts, which we like to jump into sometimes. And actually, Ben Rhodes got an extra $50K bonus by winning the truck race this past weekend. So that was interesting. Another little bit of facts from this past weekend. Justin Haley set the most miles driven in one day in the NASCAR national races at 898.5 miles, which I thought was interesting. As he competed in the Xfinity race and the Cup race. So pretty monumental day for him in that sense. That's a lot of miles. That's a long day. That's a long day. That's a serious on the whoop. You would be burning some serious calories. I think I had a 5,000 calorie day. So
how much of that 3.66 million do you think Josef took home?
I was thinking about this earlier today. So you and I have had this discussion before. I feel like commonplace is somewhere between 40 and 50%. I don't know IndyCar contracts as well, but I assume a lot is built around the Indy 500 in many of them. I do sort of know what most IndyCar drivers at Penske make, and it's pretty similar amongst all of them. I don't know, 40, 50%, you think? You think he got there?
$1.5 million at least.
Yeah.
It's a big day.
$1.5 million. It's a really nice day. You're gonna make a pass in the last lap for $1.5 million. It's pretty nice. I think.
Not to mention
I think second place. Yeah, immortality. I think second place is over $1 million or just at it too. So with a $17 million purse. Yeah, that's a good one to win. It's a great race. Love that. It does cost a lot. Just so you know, they run that race and do it appropriately. I believe the estimation is somewhere around $1.8 million for the month of May to basically do that all correctly.
Wow.
$2 million. Yeah. So it's a big part of their budget too. Penske also won the Cup race. The Coca-Cola 600, also known as the World 600. Brian Blaney finally breaks his winless streak,
which I've noticed,
at 59 races.
Dale Jr. will not call it anything other than the World 600.
Is that where I got that from? Is that why I said that?
Yeah, he doesn't call it the Coke 600.
That's why I said it. I was like, why would I even think to say that right there? I was like saying the Coca-Cola 600, and I was like, why did I say it's also the World 600? Why does anyone care? What am I trying to do there? I must have been inceptioned by Dale Jr.
I don't know. Maybe when you're Dale Jr., you can not say things like Coca-Cola unless they pay you to.
I'm calling it the Spite Core 600 now. How about that? That's the new name. I'm keeping it there. Oh, just some more news around the world. You've got me with that one. iRacing announced that they and the FIA are teaming up to create a Formula 4 series in iRacing, which is pretty cool because you and I are big fans of sort of connecting the iRacing world to the real world, and so it sounds like the FIA may be looking at sort of using them as another part of the ladder system into their really well-designed ladder system that goes all the way through to F2 and then eventually Formula 1. So I think that's pretty good. Pretty cool. See where that goes for them.
That would be like for NASCAR fans, that would be like Xfinity getting its own license.
No, lower than that.
What's
No,
that?
F4, that would be like F2. So F4 would be like ARCA having
ARCA or truck.
Yeah.
Yep.
ARCA. No, not truck. Truck would be Formula 3. So, you know what's funny? before we go, I want to. We're going to dive more into the NASCAR stuff and some of the bigger topics, but I was having this discussion with another Truck Series driver who actually races full time in the Truck Series. Has won a championship. If you listened to earlier in this podcast, you may know who I'm talking about. But I said, you know what's funny about NASCAR is we're the only form of racing, basically in the world, that the ladder series, Xfinity and trucks, still have professional drivers making a living. When you look at what they're doing in the Formula One ladder system, because you and I had the joke the other day where I was telling you how one of my dreams, it was one day that when I was done racing, was to go do the European ladder system, because that's what I wanted to do as a kid, to go to Formula One. Not actually get to Formula One, but like just straight up pay and go do the F3 or like the Formula Ford Festival in Brands Hatch, go do F3, go do Macau, go do F2. Just work my way up the ladder system myself for fun, because I never got to go run it. And now I think they're going to turn it so much into like such a ladder system design similar to other sports that you won't, they'll have age limits, I think, if they don't have already, where, once you're over 25, you can't do F3 and that sort of thing. Yeah. And they have experience limits. I know many years ago, Nelson Piquet Jr. tried to run, I think, a special F3 race, and he wasn't allowed because he had too much experience. So they're already gatekeeping it from allowing me to live my dream. So, boo.
I mean, I've thought that there should be experience barriers to get to the next level in NASCAR. And I think I've had this bold idea that they should be tied to performance, even though we have, it can potentially be an interesting conversation where it's like, well, equipment and this and that. I feel like you shouldn't be allowed to move up to the next level in NASCAR until you get some specified accomplishment, right? Number of starts, number of top tens, things like that, races without wrecking, things like that. Because I think, I think it would also be a potentially a performance incentive for race teams to provide a more quality product too. If a driver needs
I think
top 10 finishes to get up to the next level, they're not going to go, sign a long-term deal with a team or bring sponsorship to a team that's not capable of top 10s.
Yep. That's interesting, and I think similar to Formula One, the Cup Series should have a license system, like a super license system. I really think
template, the proof is already there. I mean, the template is already there with iRacing and the iRating system and the safety rating system. I think NASCAR, from the ground up, starting in, NASCAR home tracks, could find a way to develop, its own algorithm for performance and, rating drivers through the system so that they make sure that they have the highest quality drivers competing in their series. To me, it is completely absurd to think that the drivers in the top level of motorsport aren't the most capable drivers that should be in that level, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
when the funding is there, it's frustrating that that's the case.
Yep.
It's not the case.
And so I feel like, the sanctioning body should definitely put some guardrails around to protect their own sport. I'm not even asking them to do this for the drivers. I think they should do it for their own sport, to protect guardrails around their own sport, to make sure that, hey, if you want to compete in the Cup Series or if you want to compete in the Xfinity Series or in the Truck Series, you have had to meet these certain accomplishments at the lower series to make your way up.
And it gives the lower series more value as well. It just overall, I think, helps. And, it'd be interesting is if there was someone involved at the NASCAR lower series and regional series that listened to this podcast and would hear these sorts of suggestions. That'd be interesting. Wonder if they'd use them.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I'm sure they could reach out to us and we could have a discussion.
Last thing on speaking of eNASCAR, by the way, just got to give a shout out to our very own Colin Keister in the E-Racer car, Wendy's car. Finished P2, by the way. Or ran P2. Sorry,
nice.
Ran P2. Finished 7th.
Ran P2. Finished 7th.
Yeah. Josh, our producer, totally messed me up on that and wrote P2, and I will admit I fell asleep last night. I was on 4 hours sleep, so I didn't get to see the finish. But I did check,
I knew
and then
both
he
of our
wrote
drivers
he wrote P2.
were
He wrote
looking forward to
P2, and I was
Charlotte.
like, wait, he finished P2? Am I misremembering? I guess I was really tired when I woke up this morning, so I was like, all right. No, he didn't.
We
He
tried
got
to make
top
it
10.
easy. We tried to make it easy on you this year by hiring 2 drivers with the same name, so we could at least have some consistency there. But
You will never go wrong calling our driver Colin. It's just how you spell it, whether you use a C or a K.
oh, man.
2 drivers
What's next?
who do not have the same name, that would be Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin, had a bit of an altercation this weekend, my man. This is what everyone's been waiting for us to discuss. So we've seen this with the next-gen car before. The 2 cars run side by side very easily. The bottom car sort of walks itself up the track, ends up dooring the outside car, or arrow shoves them into the outside wall. The outside car is upset with this scenario, of course, and being abused and maybe feeling like they got used up on the exit of the racetrack. Chase Elliott retaliates against Denny Hamlin by visibly turning what I thought was visible, turning left, and right rearing Denny Hamlin straight into the wall. Hard hit in the Coca-Cola 600, as Dale Jr. called the World 600. And then gets on camera and says, you just can't drive these things once you've hit the wall. Well, it seems like NASCAR agreed with many people out there who felt like it was intentional. He is now suspended for 1 week. Denny Hamlin called for this in his interview by saying he basically threw a tantrum, and then Denny did his podcast, which I haven't listened to, but I'm assuming was a hour-long rant about how Chase Elliott should be suspended. He got his wish.
Let's be real for a second.
Yep.
They both threw tantrums. Because Chase threw a tantrum when he got hit and cranked it back into Denny and hooked him, and then Denny proceeded to throw a 4-day-long tantrum until he got what he wanted.
We're only at day 3.
I don't.
So
I'm
he got what he wanted
I'm
in
not
2 days.
blame. I don't blame him. I just.
I don't blame him. I'd be pissed too.
Who's really throwing the tantrum here?
Yeah, I would have been livid. I mean, you get right reared at
he
Charlotte
should be
with the way that wall is and everything, and just to put aside where it's just the speed, everything, and he hit a ton. Like that was a.
By the way, I'm on Team Denny on this whole thing. He got hooked and it was wrong. I mean, it was obvious. So two.
No,
two
sorry,
points.
dude. I'm Team Chase Elliott, actually.
Oh, you are.
Yeah, because there was another podcast host.
But
that
they're
was
not going to push
Team
you in the 9.
Well, he was Team Chase Elliott, and then he got in the 9. So I'm just seeing if that works for me here.
He was the only one that was Team Chase Elliott, so they were like, put him in it. He's the only guy that supported us in the last 2 days.
Love you, Corey.
I want to talk about. I want to make 2 notes here. So first off, I want to dive into a little bit of what Denny did to Chase, because and how it's different than in a Cup car than it is in the Xfinity car, and then also even the old Cup car. So what's happening here is if you go back and watch the replay, you see Denny advancing on Chase from the inside. When he gets his right rear tire close or equal to Chase's left front tire, so Denny's got this kind of position advantage. You see these guys time and time again, especially at intermediate tracks, they just start using up the guy on the outside, right, and running him up the track, essentially. And in an Xfinity car or in the old Cup cars, the guy on the outside in those scenarios, yes, you are losing an angle advantage to that inside car, but what you do have still in that situation is you have the ability to suck air off of the inside car. So the inside car to make that move with the Xfinity car or the old Cup car is still a big risk, right? To dive underneath someone like that, you're going to get really loose. Even if you do kind of clear him and you try to run him up the track, he can still kind of come back around you. And if they get equal to you, they're going to suck the air off you, and the guy on the inside is in trouble now. But in this new Cup car, in this next-gen car, The driver on the inside, I'm using my hands to talk because that's how drivers have to talk about race cars. You have to use your hands. I'm sorry.
If you watch this on YouTube, you'd see it. Yep.
This is the guy on the outside. This is the driver on the inside. Drivers talk with their hands. So the car on the inside, Denny, when he gets his right rear to the left front of Chase, his car is dumping a ton of air on Chase's car or disrupting the air. It kills the aero balance. So Denny has not just a positional advantage on Chase, but he also has an aero advantage because Denny's air on his car is still pretty clean. For whatever reason, it's killing the aero balance on Chase's car, and it's making Chase super tight. So that guy on the inside can be super aggressive in terms of just using up the 9. And when he has that much positional advantage on Chase, he can just take up the space and say, hey, it's your job not to hit the wall, right? Yep. And, we've seen it time and again. The guy on the outside hits the wall because they don't want to lift or they're, or the cars just get so sucked out of the racetrack that they, they kind of lose control over them. So I wanted to kind of go over that move. It's an aggressive move, and people can say that Denny walled Chase, but I'll be honest with you, that move is part and parcel to the next gen car right now. Like, if you are the inside car at an intermediate track and you have your right rear that far up on the guy on your outside, you have all the leverage, and he should lift. Like, that's just it now. So for people to say he got walled, it's like, I think you're going to find over time here with this next gen cars, unless that aero, that dynamic changes, you're going to find the guy on the outside, he needs to lift. And if he gets walled, it's his own fault. And so, if I'm, looking at that replay again, it's just like, I don't know. Denny made an aggressive move. He ran Chase up the racetrack, but he was doing things that were all within his leverage, in my opinion. And so for Chase to just stay out there, he probably should have lifted earlier, or I don't know. You take that chance. I mean, it's late in the race. They're going for it. But that's my analysis on just the Denny part of it.
We've seen it from Kyle Larson and Bubba Wallace last year. We saw it with Ross Chastain and Noah Gragson at Kansas. We saw it with these two. We saw it with a couple others that have gotten the fence the way you're describing. I believe what you said is basically the nature of how we understand cars running side by side is changing, and it has changed because
totally different in that car.
Because this car is so different, and it's the same thing that allows these cars, as we've talked about, to run side by side for multiple laps because of the way the aero works, as opposed to the other cars that you see in Xfinity or trucks.
The car on the inside,
the old car,
is not at a disadvantage like it is with the Xfinity car or like the old Cup car. And it is, this new car has changed the dynamic of how we race each other with the air at these fast, high-speed racetracks. And so, we're still learning, and these drivers are still discovering those limits, and they're still finding where the true leverage points are. We've seen it over and over again. And for whatever reason, this particular move of getting your right rear thrown at you by the car on the inside not only is a new move, right, and it's a new leverage point that didn't really exist in the same manner with the other car, it also really does seem to piss off the guy that gets walled.
Yep. Well, and I can totally empathize with them because I would be pissed too. You know what?
Yeah.
Put aside the dynamic changes. It's like, damn it, I was there, but it's different now. And that, this will be interesting to see how the sport continually adjusts to it. And as drivers take note of that happening time and time again, you're going to go, okay, you know what? I see now. Yeah. Being on the outside is a threat.
Does not mean the same thing that it used to mean. Just because you're at his door on
doesn't
the
mean
outside
anything.
Doesn't mean you're there, because if you're at his door, he's literally just sucked half the downforce off your car and has a positional advantage over you. You got to lift, buddy. You're going to the fence. You got to lift, bro.
Got to lift, man. One guy who's experienced it for the first time is Carson Hocevar, who's getting a chance in the 7 car because, as we mentioned, Corey Lajoie going into the 9 to replace the suspended Chase Elliott. What do you think? What do we set the line on for Corey? And I should mention, obviously, the Xfinity Series, we are up in Portland, So maybe some of the drivers you would have thought would drive that 9 or drive the 7 are in Portland and unable to do Gateway, where the Cup Series is. So Truck Series driver Carson Hocevar gets that chance, which he's done a good job in his couple of Xfinity starts. But yeah, what do we set the line on Corey, and how does Corey approach this weekend? Because we both know him really well. I think he knows the gravity of this, but at the same time, you don't want to put too much on this because he's doing an incredible job. I believe he's 20th in points right now for Spire. I mean, we're halfway through the season, the regular season.
I think he's going to do pretty good. I don't think I want to underestimate.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for that shocking proclamation.
No, I think he's going to do really good. I don't want to underestimate him because
don't step on a limb.
Corey, yeah, I don't really have anything super controversial, but I do think it's a little analytical. So if you guys enjoy when I get analytical about things, here's why I think he's going to do well. I think Corey has this mental capacity to dig deep when he really wants to, and I think we've seen it from him in the past, particularly at Atlanta last year. Essentially called a shot, right? Said I'm going to win this race, and then went there and didn't just get there at the end. He just was there all day, ran the top 5 all day. He willed it into existence. And I think he's done that a couple times this year. I think he's extremely capable, especially when his mind is there. So, I mean, I haven't talked to him this week. I don't know where his mind is at. I would hope it's, I hope he's in a all-out effort. I hope he doesn't approach it like like he wants it to come to him. Because I don't think you can let it come to you. I think you have to attack, even though you're driving the 9 car for Hendrick Motorsports. I think you gotta give it all you got. Now, I will say I don't know how he ran at Gateway last year. I don't know if it was that good. So there's a question there of if Gateway is a good track for him. The other question too is, how's the 9 car gonna be? But
that's my
with
question.
Josh Berry at the short tracks, I think it was pretty good, right?
Yep,
ran pretty well at Richmond. So
it entirely depends.
I think he'll run top 10.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting for him to experience that team, right? And sort of what those cars are like, considering how good he's doing in his Spire Motorsports number 7 this year. Personally, I absolutely think he'll do great. I think to me, once again, I'm not going to put so much stock in the result as much as the performance. Does he go out there and match the Hendrick Motorsports teammates in qualifying and match their pace through the race? And so, if they get spun out or pit crew messes up or whatever and he doesn't get a great finish, so be it. But to me, the performance is what's going to matter, not the end result on a one-off like this. The position he is. I did think the line for him is somewhere in the top 10 in terms of if you were doing over-under. I'm going to say 7.5 over-under. What are you taking?
Ooh. Man,
because that's a great day.
You suckered me in, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
You suckered me in because I just said how good he's going to do. I said he's going to be top 10, so you put him at 7.5. I was thinking 9.5, and I'd take the under.
Easy.
7.5. You're going to make me. You're making me take the over on a guy that I want to take the under on.
All right, well, to be contrarian, I'll take the under. So he's going to get in the top 7. He'll get a top 5. It'll be a ceremonious moment for him and for young drivers throughout the country who want to go, or go win it, or grind, who just want to be a grinder and get to a position like this. It's really impressive. Carson Hocevar got nothing to lose, bud. Go have fun, enjoy it. Not many expectations there. Yeah, don't back it in, and you should be just fine. With that, we've basically covered everything. The only thing left is I'm headed to Portland. You got to run there. I haven't been there since 2006, where I raced against Alexander Rossi in Formula Renault. Was the last time I went to Portland International Raceway. So
I don't think it's changed.
It hasn't, and I was trying to remember. I believe he and I, neither of us won that weekend. Or maybe he won the second race. We used to do 2 races a weekend at that time. But I beat him in the first race, finished second, and I think I finished second in the second race, and he won. So he did one-up me, I think, at Portland. It won't rain this time. What do I need to know?
I don't know if I can help you because it wasn't even ever dry last year at that track at all. So if it rains, call me, and I can
Deal.
talk to you about it in the rain. But otherwise, I don't know if I can help you because there was nothing dry. I will say the food in Portland is delicious.
All right. Looking forward to that. So that's great. I've done a ton of sim. I'm quite excited. Road course racing. Obviously, some of my favorite stuff is stock cars on road courses. So I can't wait because I get to go do 2 of them. We're doing Portland, and then we go to Sonoma. And I think, obviously, both are huge opportunities for my race team and to turn around. Sort of the month of May, man, I love it. It's one of my favorite months of the year, but it was brutal to me in the old driving sphere. I don't think I had a single good moment this entire month. So I'm really looking forward to racing in June going forward. And any other
Fresh
time
start.
it's not, fresh start. I've never really thought about the world and the racing that way, but I think I have to because it's been brutal. So with that, I just want to give a shout out to our producer, Josh Mendoza, who's done a great job so far this time and for making time with us today on this different timing for us recording this podcast on Wednesday. So thank you, Josh. And if you don't have anything else, that's the Money Lap.
Let's do it. Good luck, buddy.
Thank you, bud. Peace. Hey, before you go, please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, click the bell icon below to be alerted to our latest videos. We also request that you let us know every single thing that we did wrong in this video or prior ones in the comment section below. We might just go through and answer them, or you'll make it to the next episode of the podcast or our next video. Also, subscribe on your favorite listening platform to be able to listen to this podcast on the go. And subscribe to our newsletter at themoneylap.com to get the best 5 minutes in motorsports delivered directly to your email inbox every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching.
We get hit record once we start this.
Landon is a little quiet to me.
Oh boy.
Why are you
I don't know what to do. Talking. I'm talking. I'm trying to talk. Am I quiet?
Nice.
Well, I don't know. I can speak up a little bit.
I don't even know how this works. Meanwhile, that is dedication that you brought that whole thing with you. That's pretty awesome.